Happy morning and a wonderful evening, Masters. Happy Makar Sankranti. So, wonderful start for this festivities today by listening to the Wisdom by Immortal talks, Shunya given to us through Hanuman. So, Masters will continue with our session further. As we have discussed last time, we were talking about different timelines and talking on with respect to the story of Chandra. So we'll discuss today further on what happens after, when Hanumanji is trying to work out on how to bring the soul or how to save the kid of Chandra. So just to revamp through the last session, as we know that since Hanumanji, like this chapter 4 deals with the strings of time. So basically in this chapter, Hanumanji tries to explain to us different levels of consciousness of souls. And he says through this entire chapter that soul's journey is a process of evolving through consciousness, and it's steadily progressing through different levels or stages of consciousness. So just in a nutshell, when Urmi's previous lifetime was shown as one of the lifetimes where she was living in the body of a lady called Chandra, who was a wife of a farmer in one of her previous lifetimes. And when some group of monkeys come into the village and they lose their path, and suddenly some random people, ignorant people, some children and some adults try to throw stones over these monkeys and wanted to hurt these monkeys just for their own time pass or their own happiness that they get by hurting these monkeys. And suddenly these monkeys come onto Chandra's rooftop, and once Chandra's son observes the group of monkeys reaching his house, he tries to see them, and in that process somewhere he loses balance and he falls through the ladder onto the ground. And Chandra was in despair and shock, and she was grieving for her son was not opening the eyes. And then Hanumanji beautifully explains the word service or the word compassion or the word karma yoga part here, because without any expectations of having any good karma, or without any expectations of a pleasure or a pride or inflating your ego while you're serving others, Chandra here just does it very randomly without any thought of what she's doing. She goes upstairs, up to the, she climbs the ladder, she goes up to the terrace, and she gives food to this really bad, to this group of monkeys, which are in a really, really bad state. They didn't have food. They were not able to take rest for so many days. And that act of compassion, or that act of which Chandra has done, has, brought a, as author says in this book, shaped the inner world, where Hanumanji was deep in his meditation, suddenly gets this jerk of energy, and he opens his eyes looking for that person who has attained godhood. So we sometimes try to do things with respect to, just simple acts of ours without any expectations, without any inflation of our ego, is more than enough for us reaching to that level. So we try to always see ourselves as humans with limitations, but we always have that love and compassion deep underneath our soul, or deep inside our heart where our soul resides. But our expectations, our ignorances prevents us to see our true higher self. And that's what Hanumanji is trying to express, that you don't need to lift with or go do some tapas or somewhere in the mountains or do something else, but just live the way of your life without expecting without the karma yoga part, which we say, right? Do your karma, do your actions, be responsible to the consequences of your actions, but don't linger around the fruits of your actions. Let that be, accept, and just move on. So when Chandra was all doing that, Hanumanji comes and he looks over what's happening, and then he finds out that Chandra's son has lost consciousness, and now he goes and explores the T timelines to see which part would help Chandra to come out of the suffering, because now the soul from the Chandra's kid or the boy has now come out of the body, and it's somewhere in the dream world, which is trying to plan to incarnate into some other body. So at that stage, they can't bring the soul back because it's now getting ready for itself to go into some other body. Now it will have some other sets of parents, a new, drama to be played. So at this stage, the only suffering is here for Chandra, not for the soul of the boy. And now Hanuman is trying to see that how he can do his best to prevent Chandra to move away from the suffering. So in that process, the discussion happens, and like previously, I'll just share the PPT. So in that discussion, Hanumanji tries to explain about T strings, starting from T6 to T14, explaining about each T string, which we have discussed in the previous session. T6 to be the first T string, he explains it to be a monkey soul, and the human part of the soul, the soul's experience to this humanity starts from T7 T strings till T14, he tries to explain. So now what happens is that previously we have ended at a place where Hanumanji is trying to bring the soul back, or bring the soul into the boy, into the body of the Chandras, into the Chandra's boy, I mean the body of the boy of the Chandra. So now Hanumanji here, he explains that when he sees Chandra's soul, he understands that the soul that the Chandra owned has 13 T strings. So, yeah. So the soul of the Chandra has 13 T strings. So now, usually what happened when we discussed about T14 till 14 T strings of soul, Hanumanji says that when a person when a person is having a soul which has a maturity of 14 T strings, then the soul has a capability to split itself into two souls. So each T7 plus T7. So one soul is looking outside to the materialistic world, into this Maya, into this illusion. It's living this in the world of this Maya. And the other soul will stand behind this soul and will hold a mirror showing to this soul that this is what you truly are. So don't get carried away into this Maya. So these two souls will both complement each other, and they will ultimately return into nothingness, and the original soul eventually attains moksha and freedom from this cycle of birth and death. Though that's how the soul helps itself to get out of this cycle of karma and desire. So by splitting itself into two parts, and that is to a soul which is in the highest matured level, which is having about a strings of 14 T strings. Now, when Hanumanji observes that whether he can split the soul of Chandra and give one of the part of the soul to be put inside the body of the Chandra's boy, because all here what Chandra wants is his boy. She has no knowledge about this soul as has come out of this body, and now it is going through a transition into another body. So for Chandra, it's all about her boy getting up and, happily laughing, running around, or enjoying the day and eating whatever she cooks. And, she knows her boy through the body only, nothing more. So it doesn't matter which soul occupies the body of the boy. So now when Lord Hanuman sees that Chandra's soul has 13 T strings, he thinks of a possibility that he can split Chandra's soul into two parts. Like, the most probable that he can do is divide it into T6 and T7. And then Lord Hanuman tries to discuss this idea with Kala, the god of time was there. So they both were discussing it. So now Hanumanji says that if at all she has one more T string, like if she would have got 14 T strings, then he would not have worried much, because the soul is already split and he can just take one part of the soul and do the whatever the astral surgery or whatever they can do and make the boy to get up now, because the boy has a part of the soul from her mother. So finally, um, uh, the discussion happens between Kala and Hanumanji. And Kala has a little opposition. The god of time has a little opposition towards this, and he debates with Hanumanji, saying that you can't do this, because if you do this, we don't know which part of the soul is going to stay with Chandra and which part is going to go into the body of the boy. So either Chandra is going to have C6, which means now we talked about T6, right? T6 is about 6 T strings, which has a monkey soul. So they have no idea about this. What do you say? They're morally demented, and they only respond to basic desires like food and progeny. So their intellectual mind is not that developed. So they look mostly mentally retarded. So Kala, the god of time, says that this will look very unfair, because what happens is that we don't know which part of the soul is going to stay back in Chandra and which part is going to go into the boy's body. So if Chandra is going to have 6 T strings, then she's going to behave very demented and, like mentally retarded. And she's living in a village at a time where people have no respect of the other person. They can beat animals left and right. Imagine a woman who is behaving like this, and her own family members will think that she's got some evil spirits or something, and one fine day they will leave her. So this is not good for Chandra. And if at all this C6 goes, this 6 T strings go into the boy's body, if at all this T6 part goes into the boy's body, then the boy will be mentally retarded or mentally disabled. He will be, and the rest of the life Chandra has to suffer with a kid with that state. So I don't think so this is a very good method or very good possibility that we can take for saving the boy. So Hanumanji says that very calmly. He says, let's see what happens. And he checks for her husband, Chandra's husband, and Chandra's husband has only 7 T strings, so they can't work with Chandra's husband. So now Hanumanji says that this looks like little out of ordinary. It's going to be a very challenging situation. So if both mother and child has to survive, then I think it definitely needs some godly intervention here. And so as Kala says that, and Hanumanji suddenly stops Kala and he says that, okay, I think we can go with another possibility, is that if there is any monk nearby, a man who is in quest to understand or in the process of self-realization have surrendered to this path. So this monk might help, because usually they might have T14 T strings. So one part of the soul can be taken and given to the boy. So then the discussion happens, and Hanumanji goes into the inner worlds where there are multiple T timelines. And he tries to see for one of the timeline where he sees that there is a monk who can come to that place. And but Kala comes and interferes here, says that you can see that timeline, and in the next 6 hours, the soul is going to leave the body of the boy, and it looks like the monk can't come here in that time, whatever, because I'm the god of time and I can tell the possibility. So, and he says that there is another timeline beside that where you and me are there, and Chandra is crying, and the monk has not reached, and we are trying to, it's almost time where the soul has completely disconnected itself from the body, and we are trying to find solution. So I don't think so that would be a possibility. But Hanumanji says that don't think like that, Kala. We'll prevent the soul of Chandra to go to that timeline. Let us see how we can approach that, see that how the monk can come to this place immediately. So, and suddenly to the other scene, we see that the monk is sitting under a tree and is nicely meditating. And suddenly a thought comes into his mind and he gets up and he starts walking without any destination in his mind. So this monk has been meditating for countless years under that tree, wandering all around in search for or in an earning for to meet his almighty, his Hanuman, because he completely surrendered to this invisible force, and he called himself as his guru. He called Hanumanji to be his guru, and he started his quest to understand this illusionary world, and he wants to get out of it. So he was in that self-realization path. So immediately that thought comes, and he was not consciously aware of it, and suddenly he gets up and he starts walking wherever the destiny is trying to take him. So he's in that path where he's going to reach the farmer's house. Now suddenly Hanumanji goes to the rooftop on the other side, and he sees that those monkeys now beautifully, when Chandra gave food to those monkeys were nicely fed, and right now they took some rest. So Hanumanji goes there, and there's a beautiful line here where a discussion happens between Hanumanji and those monkeys. The monkeys might be screeching or they might be making some weird noises, but only the gods heard them, and they rejoiced because there was an interaction that was happening between a lowest state of consciousness with the highest one. The monkeys were talking with another physically looking person we call as monkey god or so much, but a man like Hanuman with highest of his consciousness. So the conversation between a lowest state of consciousness and a highest state of consciousness was happening there. And after sunset, Hanumanji could guide those monkeys into the nearby forest, and they leave the house and they just go away. Now, when Hanumanji comes to Kala, and Kala immediately, who's a little bit startled because there is only 10 minutes left where Chandra's soul would, slip into the tragic scene of losing her child. And now Hanumanji says that, Kala, I think you need to intervene. Bring the monk here immediately within 5 minutes. Then Hanumanji says that, then Kala says to Hanumanji that I think someone should fly him from there to here. Because whatever I could see, it's going to take him 30 minutes in this 3-dimensional timing. So with his human capabilities, how much ever he can use, he's going to be reaching this place in 30 minutes, and all we have only 10 minutes. So Lord Hanuman knew that this was not some war where he's trying to save the entire humanity or a world, but this is all about saving one family and a child, and Chandra, to prevent her to go through the suffering and pain eventually if she loses her son. So flying someone against their destiny would means that Hanumanji is breaking a lot of rules with respect to this world or this universal laws that we talk about. So that would mean more harm than good that is going to happen. So Hanumanji is trying to work on some solution that would abide by the laws of Earth and this universe. So now Kala understood the situation, and immediately the Kala god of the time says to Hanumanji, that the only thing that we can do right now is that let us assist the mother in splitting her soul. Let us split Chandra's soul into 2 parts. And yes, people are gonna label her lunatic or demented or whatever, but at least the boy will survive, and let us see what happens later. We can find a solution for the side effects later. So for a soul with 13 T strings, it's not easy to split it, right? Only with a soul with 14 T strings, the split can happen because the soul is already in that state. But here, a soul which is in the state of 13 T strings, the splitting of the soul is something which requires a lot of intervention and lot of work by the higher ascended masters. So now Hanumanji looks at the soul's willingness, more than that, the willingness of the soul. So Hanumanji looks at Chandra, who sat near her child with a hope that, here in her eyes that this boy is gonna wake up from whatever the state he is right now. But in normal circumstances, a body which is possessing a soul with 13 T strings is going to be very difficult. But now here, Chandra's situation is very different. Chandra is having a desire to have her child to be saved, even at the cost of her own life. That's a bonding between mother and the son or daughter or with her progeny. So here Hanumanji sees that our job is becoming much easier, but otherwise in normal circumstances, it's very difficult. So, but now Kala says that Kala, the god of time, he examines the entire T strings and the soul of soul inside the Chandra body, the soul of Chandra's soul, which we call about. So here Kala says that I understand that there is a desire to save her child at any cost of her own life. But I see that the desire to save her child at the cost of her own life is not that deep enough, because she might think that she desires it, but she doesn't, if I go into a deeper level. Because now I'm looking at the packets of her desires that are around her soul. We talked it earlier in the previous chapter that if a soul wants to live a timeline, live a character, it might be Chandra, it might be Urmi, then it has to wear the dress of the desire and karma of that particular soul. So now the Kala, the god of time, is examining that ornament or that dress of Chandra's soul. And there he's seeing that the Chandra's desire is not that strong enough to save her child. Then he says that look at the packets of the desires accumulated around her soul. The basic desire to save her own life is stronger and brighter than the desire to sacrifice herself to save her child. Now, what does that mean? It means that she loves her own life more than of her son. Then Hanumanji beautifully says that it's called attachment, Kala. After a long pause, when Kala says that, I see that Chandra is having more desire to save herself rather than sacrificing herself for her son, because of the desire packets of desire around the soul of the Chandra. Then Hanumanji says that it is all because of attachment. And because this emotion called attachment, it gets blended with every other emotion of what a human being has. And that is what is leading her to do what she could do to her child. Even she could not have done that to an enemy of hers also. So it's very important that attachment is one of the dangerous things that any person can have. If anyone would have asked me, Hanumanji says that the one thing the person needs to work is to work around his or her attachments. And here he beautifully says the story where Kala says that, are you trying to tell the story of the charioteer in a hailstorm? And then Hanumanji says that, yes, it's the same story. So this story called the charioteer in a hailstorm is a famous moral or a fable, like a story which is popularly told among the devas or the ascended masters. So now this story follows in such a way that sorry, masters. So now this story follows in such a way that there was once a charioteer whose chariot, this chariot is nothing but it has a small hood-like structure in the behind and two horses run it. So this charioteer whose chariot suddenly got stuck in a pit while he was traveling. So the weather was very bad and there was hailstorm that was looming around. It looks like, hailstorm, those are those ice, solid ices that would fall from the sky. So it was looking like it was that kind of a climate that day. So Now, what is the situation here with the charioteer is that even though the chariot is stuck in the pit somewhere, the charioteer could save himself by sitting in that enclosed room behind. He could save himself and he could wait till the hailstorm is finished. But he was worried and about the horses, which he loved more than his own life. He loves his horses. And in that worry, what happens is that he gets down and he saws that there is a shelter nearby at a distance. And now he starts to push that wheel from the pit so that he can take the chariot to that shelter. And only at that point of time, only one thought was thundering in his mind. He had to somehow free that wheel from the pit and has to take the chariot to the nearby shade. Now, in that process, when he was trying to do that work, the hailstorm started to happen, and huge chunks of ice were falling from the top. And all he could do is that he couldn't do anything. He just gave up and he started cursing the gods for bringing that weather. And plenty of emotions were piling up. There was fear, there was sadness, there was anger, there was expectations, and each infested with the deadly thing called attachment here. Now, he could go into this, box-like structure behind the wheel. And he sat there and he was having a lot of, grief. There were tears filled in his eyes because he was watching that the hail was hitting his horses like arrows. And after some time, due to that intense hailstorm, those horses died with a lot of suffering. And only when the death of horses happened and all those emotions evaporated, along with the attachment of his towards his horses, he realized that all he could do was he could have separated his horses from the carriage. He didn't need to move the entire carriage towards the shelter. All he could do was he could have unlocked those pins that was tying the horses to the carriage, and he could have sit in the carriage and the horses would have gone to a safe place. Now here Hanumanji is telling that this is what attachment does to the mortals. Attachment does to the human beings. It makes them hold on tightly to their identity, their beliefs, their notions. It makes them insecure. It makes them to behave foolishly, possessively about who they are and what they have. So in the above story, the charioteer, even with his intense love towards his horse, he became solely responsible for their death. So here Hanumanji says that love liberates a person. Unconditional love always liberates a person, because where there is unconditional love, there is no more attachment. But love infested with attachment, it does the opposite. It creates insecurity, it creates fear. Here Chandra is having no doubt immense love towards her child, but it was the attachment infested love. She was having anger towards her deity. There were expectations from her gods. There was sadness due to the circumstance that she was in. There was fear of losing her son. So all these emotions were infested with the attachment, which was making her hold tightly to her identity of Chandra. Here, the identity that Chandra has got attached, which is infested with attachment, is I am Chandra. I believe in such and such deity. My son is battling for his life. I have firm faith that my deity will save him. I know everything will be all right and I will be having dinner with my son in a few minutes. So if all her thoughts, Hanumanji is telling that here all her thoughts that had I, me and mine, which is attached to this concept called I, me and mine, if you put all these thoughts in a bag, and that bag, if you give an identity to that bag, or if you want to name that bag, you can name that bag as Chandra's identity. Because of attachment, she was very tightly holding on to this bag. And here Hanumanji says that those ascended masters or gods or the universe is there right now, or she has a possibility to shift the timeline. The entire cosmos is there to help her. But all they need was for Chandra to let loose of this bag. she needs to free herself from this bag. In ordinary problems, what happens is that that is not happening here with Chandra. And further, Hanumanji says that usually in some small problems, which a person or a soul goes through in a timeline, when help is asked for, all they need to do is that they need to remove some part of content from this bag, some attachments from this bag. But here in this case, the situation that she is in, she has to let go at least half of her attachments with I with respect to Chandra. So all Chandra needs to is do here is that she needs to separate herself from this idea called as I, me, and mine, my beliefs, my understanding towards things. Sometimes she has to surrender, and that is something which humanity doesn't do many a times. We always use our intellectual mind, which is good. There is no doubt in it. But not every time it works. Sometimes we need to surrender to the situation, have faith and have patience. That's it. Nothing. Let's just let it happen. What is going to happen? We have to detach ourselves for some time. And that is what Hanumanji says, that is what your guardian angels or your higher self wants at that point of time. Because if they want to intervene or they want to do something, this is acting as a blockage. So Hanumanji further says that once Chandra sets free her thoughts, then how her thoughts are going to be. So for this thought, initially when she's thinking of herself as I am Chandra, then once she let go of that attachment towards her identity, she'll start thinking that, am I Chandra? Is it real? Am I this human body named Chandra? And then if she thinks that I believe in such and such deity, then the counter thought would be that, why should I believe? What is there to believe? And for the thought that my son is battling for his life, the counter thought that Chandra will have is that, is it reality or is it real a nightmare? Am I dreaming? So for a thought that I know everything will be all right, I'll be having dinner with my son in few minutes, the counter thought, if she let go of this identity or attachment towards I, me, and mine, what her thought would be? Her thought would be like, how do I know what is right? What is wrong for me? Who has given this notion right and wrong in my tiny head? So this is how her thought process would be. Once you detach yourself from this ego or I or me or mine, your thought process will be very, very different. You start questioning everything. So this type of things can happen to a seeker usually with a 14 T strings. A person who is living with the external reality of Maya, but a other part of the soul is telling you, check it, this is not reality, you are staying in an illusion. Check it, how you are reacting with the people, check it. This is not you, this is not your true identity. Sometimes we get this inner calling, right? You know, when we are in a situation and suddenly there's an inner calling that is telling us that this is not who you truly are. So check it, this is not your identity, these are not your emotions. So like that, this kind of a thought process happens to a soul which is at the matured level or which has a 14 T strings. That is what Hanumanji says. So because that soul is trying to detach itself from the identity of I and me and mine. So it's in that process. So for a soul like Chandra, who is having 13 T strings, how can this thought process happen? How can she detach herself from this ego or I, me, and mine? Then Hanumanji says that only one thing could break that attachment towards Maya or towards external reality. And that one thing that could lose her grip from her identity, at least for a short period of time, is the death of a loved one or any other grave tragedy or a deep suffering that will cause that thought to invoke in that soul. And the soul split can happen only when such kind of a trauma or a suffering happens to the soul. Now, because here Hanumanji has to do that soul splitting for or to Chandra's teeth soul, which has a 13 T strings. So for the splitting of the soul, or for it's a very paradoxical situation, because here they're trying to help Chandra to prevent or to not to have suffering and pain. But for not to have suffering and pain, they have to first give her suffering so that her soul gets that shock from the Maya that she's in, making her bring that thought process that what is happening. You know, sometimes when things happen, really tragic things happen in our life, that's what majority of times we take a U-turn, or we just bifurcate our path and go towards this part of spirituality. Before that, we are deeply under the illusion of Maya. We don't know what is, we are completely in ignorance. We are just randomly running in that puzzled mazed garden where we have no idea which door to open, or we are just randomly living our life. And things are also happening randomly. There is no understanding towards our purpose of life. Our purpose is only defined with respect to this external Maya, not with respect to the soul. So only when a deep kind of suffering comes, or only when a tragedy happens to us with respect to our physical body, or with respect to a death or any kind of suffering, it might be, what do you say, major financial tragedy or something, that kind of, which really, puts a deep impact in us. Then this thought process happens, and then the soul, takes a direction towards the spiritual path. So usually these kind of things are happening in our life because unless and until we don't counter them, those paradoxical situations happen in our life, because unless and until we don't go through suffering, we don't prevent ourselves from further suffering and pain. So that is how Hanumanji is telling here. So he says that this kind of situations happen in a human being's life, and the gods and your higher self is ready to help you, but we fail to take that help because we are somewhere, or deep inside we are still attached towards our identity. We are not completely letting loose of it. So now, after explaining this concept, Hanumanji says, Kala says that now there is only 4 minutes left before the child's soulless body will be officially called as dead. So Hanumanji now immediately he seeks the help of the god of the winds. We call as Pavana. God of the wind is called as Pavan Kumara. So I think now Hanumanji goes, or he invokes the god of winds, and he says that praise to the god who resides in the bodies of mortal beings. Some call him Pavana and other call him Prana. So he invokes the god of winds, and he bows in front of him saying that I need your help. Now here beautifully Hanumanji says that Prana is also another name to Pavana, the god of winds, because the living beings move only if there is prana or life force inside the body. And the mortal body of the Chandra's sun lies before all of them. Even though the soul is right now not there in the body of Chandra's sun, but the prana has not left the body. So such is the greatness of this word prana. So even though if the soul might not be there in the body, he gives the mortal body a full chance, so that a time frame, so that they can summon some soul back into the body. So now with that understanding, Hanumanji pleads generously to the god, saying that I request you to immediately leave the body of Chandra's sun. And Lord Hanuman folds his hand in deep reverence, and he bows in front of the god, saying that please do this for me, the god of winds. Then Pavan, the god of winds, gets shocked. He says that, how can you tell this? You are telling me generously. It's very cruel of you, Hanuman. How can you say that? You're telling me to leave the body of this Chandra's son. If I leave the body, then there is no chance he's going to be alive. Then he says that you're supposed to protect the child, Hanuman. How can you ask me to do this? Let the boy have some last probable chances if I'm gonna stay in his body for the last 4 minutes, maybe there is something, some timeline where you can work out and help the boy soul return to the body of the boy. But Hanuman immediately starts pleading, saying that no, you have to leave the body, you have to leave the body. And the god of the winds immediately leaves the body of the Chandra's son. And the Charlton doctor who is there, he declares that the boy was dead. Now, this was the paradoxical situation Hanumanji wanted to create, because when under deep suffering, he wants to split the soul of Chandra so that he can shift a part of soul of Chandra into the body of the boy. So that was his ultimate plan. So now Chandra, however, fell into deep disbelief when she hears from the doctor, Charlton doctor, saying that the boy is no more and there is no breath. And she was shocked. She was in deep despair. She couldn't believe. And her face was expressionless. She was in deep shock. And the soul of Chandra was in a deep conflict here at that point of time when a suffering was given to her, when she was going through a pain. A part of it, or a part of his soul, knew that now she has to sink in that experience of losing a child. She has to accept that now there is no more child of hers. He has left the mortal plane. The other part is trying to believe itself that no, this is not reality, this is dream. So both these parts are rubbing together, and they are trying to generate this whole idea of universal question that every soul in its quest to self-realization brings out is, who am I actually? What is this world? What is this death? So in that pain and in that suffering, where one part is trying to sink in that information that her son is no more, but the other part of the soul is trying to feel that this is no, this is not reality, this is a dream. So in that, the spark, or in that rubbing of the soul, or that jerking, or that deep pain in the soul has ignited this question of who am I? So after 3 minutes of conflict, the Chandra started laughing, and she was not in a proper state. Now her neighbors came to Chandra and they started talking to Chandra, saying that you just cry, you let loose of that emotion, you accept now that your son has been no more in this plane. So now is the time has started. There are only 4 minutes, and in that 4 minutes, the prana is gonna leave the body, and whatever Hanumanji is gonna do, he has to do in that point of time. So what happens is that once the prana leaves the body is completely closed its pathways. No other soul can enter into the body, and it won't be able to give entry to a soul. So after the prana leaves, there is only 2-3 minutes time where the work needs to be done by Hanumanji. So now Hanumanji sees that the friction is happening in Chandra's soul, but the soul has not yet gone through split. It has not divided itself. And Kala, the god of time, is like, after Hanumanji saying that, why don't you summon some other soul? There are so many spare souls in the realm. So why don't you ask supreme gods or someone to ask some soul to take the body of the Chandra's son? So Lord Hanuman waited for the moment. He was looking or scanning all around, and seeing that which part of the soul can be transferred and everything. And he also considered Kala's suggestion, and he started reciting the mantra of soul summoning. And but deep down, there was a thing that he was convinced that his original plan will succeed and he won't go wrong. So eventually Chandra's soul, which is having 13 T strings, finally split into 2, 6 and 7. The later part, that is T strings with 7 T strings, went into the child's body. He opened his eyes and his lips moved, and he started to look around people, and he's whispering some words. And Chandra's body is now having a soul which has 60 strings. So it's more like a monkey soul. So now Chandra has moved away from those crowd, because it was a shock to the crowd also. He was initially declared dead. Now what is happening? So now Chandra is not like in her original part of her soul. Her soul has been divided, and she's got this monkey soul. But now she'll be very demented. Her intellect is not that up to that level. So Chandra just moved away from the crowd, and she was blinking. There was a jerking movement in her, and all these symptoms were popping up. Now Kala says that, is it the reality of Chandra? Is she going to stay like this all her life? This is not justified, Hanumanji, because for a woman who has lived so good of a life, who has earned 13 tea strings, will be an object of ridicule in the whole village. Everyone will make fun of her. And if only the life of the child was so important to you, you should have someone or called upon this soul, some other soul to occupy the body. So Hanumanji says that there is no need of wasting any other spare soul when a human solution can be worked out, because this is not a situation where there is a fight between gods and demons, or some humanity is at crisis. So, but somehow Kala is not convinced with what Hanumanji has done. And then Hanumanji says that you need to understand here, Kala, is that choice of giving that particular 7 tea strings was the choice of the Chandra's soul. It was not me. What I did was I tried to put her in a situation and help her, or catalyze that situation where the soul splitting happened. But what is gonna stay with Chandra, or what is gonna move into the body of the boy, is purely the decision of the soul of the Chandra. So she could have kept C7 and give C6 to her son, but she chose to have those 60 strings, and she gave the 70 strings to her son. Now, Kala was very critical of what Hanumanji has done, but all the ascended masters or gods who were watching this whole sequence that was happening, they praised what Hanumanji has did, because he brought a solution at the human level. He saved the child, and even Chandra is also alive without any major divine intervention, or he didn't broke any laws or whatever. He did it with whatever chances he can take, and he did it beautifully. So, but Kala says that, you might have done this, Hanumanji, but you still gave her death. It's not dementia, or it's not a mentally unstable situation for her, because now after some time, what will happen today or tomorrow? Her husband will go to fields, because he has to work in the fields. He's a farmer. Now her son will be sleeping. Now we know how Chandra is. Her intellect is not at all up to the mark. She is very mentally unstable. She'll go into the kitchen. She'll try to do something, and eventually she will put fire to her clothes, and death is still there for her. At every junction, death is luring around her. So she's not escaped that. And in that process, she might even kill her son. So then Hanumanji says that, Kala, you have described one of the thousands of paths her soul has to choose amongst. And I won't go to the junction you're talking about. Because right now you should see there is a particular timeline where there is a monk who is coming towards her home. Then Kala says that, now what's the need of the monk? What will he do? Then Hanumanji says that now he will give it to her instead of her son. Because now Chandra is having 60 strings. Now the monk will give a part of his soul, or his part of his soul to the Chandra. Because then Kala says that, see, I understand what you're telling. Initially, there is a chance that if the monk would have come, there might be a compassion that would have come out of the monk seeing that little boy on the charpai fighting for the death. But now the boy is all good, and I don't think so he would be in that connection with Chandra that he will, give a part of his soul to Chandra, because that is at the soul level and it's the decision of a soul. You might be thinking, but I don't see any possibility there. Then Kala, after saying this, Hanuman, meanwhile, the monk is approaching the house and he reaches Chandra's gate after a few minutes. And here he has no idea why he has been directed to this particular house, because just a thought, couple of hours back, a thought sparked in his mind and he randomly walked to that house for no reason. And now he reached the gate of Chandra's house and now he started begging for alms. He opens his mouth and he asks for food to eat. Now there are so many ignorant people there. Now everyone starts countering the monk who has come to Chandra's house. They say that no monk will ever beg after sunset, or you are not a monk, you are just craving for some tasty food. And all this, real monks will eat only leaves. You want tasty food, so get out from here. So there's so much abuse that was coming in and around the monk, because there was half of the village was there. So imagine how they were shouting at that monk. But monk didn't care about anything. He slowly drifted into the house nearby veranda, and he starts again shouting. A hungry monk begs for food from the owner of this house. And so in that beautifully, the author writes here that, like a sword waving through the air, the abuses just flew through his egoless self. Because what happens when we are inflated with our ego self, with our identity of ourselves, with this character of ours, we can't take abuses for such kind of a situation. Somewhere our ego gets affected. We feel that our things are not heard, or our beliefs are not accepted by the other person, or I am right, why is the other person not thinking in that way? So many thoughts keep on coming. Somewhere or the other, our ego won't accept what is happening around us if things are not happening the way we wanted it. But even though so many people were abusing the monk left and right, nothing reached even to the vicinity of the monk's mind. So he just slowly nicely went into the house with his own presence of mind, and he was asking for alms. And here, Hanumanji says that if you want to split a soul into two parts, it must be pulled by a very strong emotion from one side and a realization of supreme truth on the other side. So the rope of strong emotions tries to pull a soul towards the Maya, where the supreme truth tries to pull it opposite direction towards the self-realization path, right? So one part of the soul is towards the Maya and the other part is trying to say that, no, take the middle path. That is something which you are experiencing, but this is not what you truly are. So don't get attached. So a soul is split into two parts when it is pulled by a strong emotion by Maya on the one side and a strong emotion by a supreme truth on the other side. So here, Lord Hanuman was expecting that the monk would feel insulted by the mob and it would split his soul, because the soul of the monk is completely aligned or completely surrendered towards his higher self. Now, all the soul needs is that something for the ego to be taken so that the split happens. So none of the abuse worked there, and the soul splitting did not happen, or did not happen in a way where that it could be transferred into the other body. So just before he reached the veranda towards the courtyard, he could see the presence of Hanumanji there in that, in that place. And he started to prostrate down. He, bowed down and he was starting to recite some prayers with respect to Hanumanji. Now, immediately the people around started abusing the monk, saying that, are you doing some kind of black magic or something? And you just get up and get out of this house. What are you doing here at this point of time? Now, the monk slowly got up. He was smiling because what he said, what he saw is something which he has experienced. So he was full of smiles and he further headed straight into the house. And he knew Now he knew very perfectly that he was brought to this place because there was some godly work that needs to be done. And he felt no desire to know it also. And he felt that at this point of time, he was so surrendered to that movement or to his higher self that if it's gonna be death, then so be it. That is what the state of mind he was in. So now monk started to call the Chandra who was sitting there, saying that Devi, I need some food. And the monk did not know what was happening there. He didn't know that the child who was earlier declared dead suddenly woke up from the death, and all this whatever happened, he didn't know any idea. He had no idea of what was happening in that house. So the farmer was also thinking that his wife is still in a state of shock, and the farmer who was there was trying to convince Chandra that her son was all well and she needs to get up from the shock, and everything is gonna be fine. And the monk sees this couple there, and he approaches them and calls Chandra Devi and says that looks like you are the owner of the house. And he requests Chandra to give him some food. And he says that I am wandering nearby your village. I came from jungle. I walked for a very long time. I'm little hungry. Can you feed me some food? Now Chandra, she started behaving very differently. She's laughing loud. Sometimes she's calm. Sometimes she's seeing things. Her eyeballs are like all over the place. She's jerking her head. She's doing very differently. So she's not in a normal state. And listening to that, Chandra says that owner, and am I the owner? And she laughs and she gets up and goes into the kitchen. She and then slowly she collects the food onto the table and she spreads the food. And now she says that for at that point of time, Chandra, the people around were saying to the monk that please, sir, don't talk anything about right now. She's not in a right state of mind. A tragedy happened just now and things are happening, aligning properly. So just leave now and come back after some time. And listening to her, Chandra says that time is always right. And she gets up and she goes into the kitchen. And she says that I am a wanderer. I am not the owner of the house. And monk eventually found her behavior very plain and sublime. Unlike the other people who are in the house, who are very judgmental and who are very, confronting the monk in every way possible. But Chandra was not judging. She was not confronting the monk. She was just asking a reverse question, or she was giving an answer to the monk saying that I am the wanderer, not you, and I am not the owner of the house. And the monk found that answer to be very intriguing because there was a deep wisdom in what Chandra has said, that sentence where I am a wanderer, not a owner. Because a soul, after all, wanders from one birth to another birth, right? The soul is not staying at one place. If this mortal body decays, it goes into some other body and starts living that experience. It's only ignorance of the human personality makes it believe that it is the owner of this particular thing, of this body, of what it possesses and everything. So what Chandra has given as answer is perfect in its own way, and it's the right wisdom actually. So she is giving answer with respect to the soul. So monk felt really good about it, and she put some food on the table, and the monk went there and he stood nearby the table, and she said that she says something to the monk that I am a wanderer begging for food. You be the owner and you now feed the food to me. So for the rest of the crowd, they were thinking like this, something has happened to her. She's behaving so weirdly. And slowly after some time, people started leaving the house. And for the monk, it's very different because he has never seen such a pure act of kindness and humanity before. He has been meeting people left and right, because he has always seen people drawing pleasure and pride from their own kindness, whether they're offering food or whether they are offering money or anything. Whenever they're doing it, he is seeing a lot of pleasure and pride when in that part. when they are doing that service. But with Chandra, it's very different. So there was a sense of pure act, there was kindness, there was humanity in it. So he wasted no time and he started serving food to her, playing the role of the owner. And this interaction that he was having with the soul of Chandra is so pure that he has never experienced it. And because all this while he was experiencing kindness with respect to pleasure and pride, he could never see that unconditional love that was coming, where a soul is interacting with a soul. So immediately his eyes filled with tears, and the very next moment, when he was deep in that emotion, there was a realization also that this is an illusion. So don't get carried away. So here Hanuman says that the Maya, or the illusion that we are in, has two ropes. There is a pull from both the sides. The soul is pulled from both the sides by Maya. The one side of the rope is of all the negatives. All those things where our ego gets hurted. And the one side of the rope is positives. So here, with respect to the monk, the former, where people were abusing him left and right, it failed him to pull him, pull that soul into half. He didn't give any reaction where he was abused by the crowd. But the later, that particular illusion of Maya, of the positives, managed to pull him, because the act of goodness from Chandra was so overwhelming to him, to the deep core, that his soul, which was M14, the T strings that the monk was having, it split into two, M7 and M7. So one of them went ahead to live Chandra's character and the other stayed with him. So now Chandra's character is having two souls. One soul is of Chandra, which is 6 T strings, and the other soul is from the monk, which has 7 T strings. So what happens is that when this happens for some time, finally both the souls will go back to nothingness, because now eventually by every incarnation, the experiences the soul will have, eventually the soul will go back to nothingness, and it will get liberated from this cycle of birth and death and get moksha. But this process is gonna take more than one lifetime. So now the soul is a combination of two different souls. So Chandra couldn't even get the next birth after a long time after her death. The reason here was that her soul, which is having 6 T strings, was not ready to move on to the next birth without its other part, which was with her son. So Chandra lived that lifetime. She left that mortal body, and now the soul of Chandra is somewhere deep inside the dream world, and it is waiting there because now it's longing for the other part which was given to her son. So until her son grew, he became old and he died of a natural death. It was waiting for that time, for that whole timeline to finish. Now, after that, she was born into this character, or she incarnated into this character called Urmi in the Matang community. Now she's having two souls. That is a soul of part of the soul from her Chandra, which is having 6 T strings, and a part that came from the monk. So the soul C7, the other half of Chandra's soul, which was with her son from the previous birth, has been born into a different place. And now that soul is right now called as Ravi. It incarnated into a person called as Ravi. And Urmi and Ravi are almost of the same age. So she waited till that incarnation happened because she was longing for it. Now, Urmi's seizures or her epileptic attack, or you call it as fits, are caused by the deep desire of her soul to live with this other part. So right now, Urmi is somewhere in Sri Lanka, some deep roots of the forest in some Matang tribe, and this Ravi is somewhere hundreds of miles away in his office doing his work. So for these seizures to be moved, or for Urmi to free herself from this seizure attack, she has to be brought together to this other part of her soul. And how is going to happen is something which Hanumanji is going to describe in the next chapter, which is called Defeating Death. So this is all about this chapter of the strings of time. So here there is a other concept called soul fragmentation also, which is not here, but usually when you start reading some books, they tell about this concept called soul fragmentation. Because what do you mean by this soul fragmentation is that our soul fragments or breaks itself into pieces during the traumatic events in the past. We all go through some traumatic events. So what happens at that event is that we are so, in shock, or there is so much pain that somehow if we don't accept that situation, or we don't, live and accept that situation properly, a part of our soul gets stuck in that place, and our soul gets fragmented. So it's very important that accepting the situations is also very important, because somewhere we are trying to split our soul and we are not accepting the journey that we ourselves as a soul have chosen. So this fragmentation of the souls occurs when we have lived through a traumatic events in the past that have been too painful to even to remember also. So what happens is that we split a part of ourselves, which is our soul, and leave it in that timeline, and we just move on. So like that, soul fragmentation also happens, which is happened here with Urmi. And this is something of a concept which is explained through this chapter. Yeah, masters, any questions or anything, please do. So we are done with this fourth chapter, the strings of time. So we'll go into the next chapter, defeating death, where Hanumanji tries to work with Urmi's soul now, after giving her understanding with respect to her past lifetime, what has happened, and how her desire, it's all because of Urmi's desire, right? Urmi's desire of splitting herself and everything. So if there is no desire attached to it, Hanumanji would not have come or intervened. There is a longing desire that Urmi wanted her son to be alive. So as accordingly the soul asked, the intervention happened. So that is about this chapter. So it's little off the beat for many of you, but this is what I've explained. So yeah, masters, thank you. Any questions, any sharings, please do ask. Please do share if anyone is reading the book, their perspective. Yeah, Prerna ma'am.
Hello, Ravli ma'am. Very well explained. It was very interesting. I had just attended the last three, then I went back to the recordings and I listened from part one and I understood completely. In today's session, when you said the soul splitting, so and Chandra was waiting until the sun soul exit from his body. So at that time, the Chandra soul and the sun soul, they're not going to merge together. It will stay like that.
That is gonna happen in the next chapter, where Hanumanji is gonna he has to merge, because that is Chandra's soul in its completeness. So that is gonna happen. He's gonna explain it in the next chapter, which is called defeating death, where he's gonna merge, or he's gonna take Chandra's soul and the soul of Ravi right now. I mean, Urmi's soul and the soul of Ravi right now into astral plane, and there the beautiful explanation is given to us through that situation. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking that before Urmi is going to born, they're going cheating. You told she was waiting for her son.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because it couldn't take the birth immediately. There was a longing for that soul to get united with its other part. So that's why it was stuck there for much time. And now it reincarnated, just as her son took who was from his previous life, the soul, the part of the soul took birth again. So that now both of them are of same age. Now the work needs to be done. So this whole thing was told for us to understand like what happened with this thing, why Urmi is suffering. Because whatever the soul splitting or whatever has happened, it happens to us also. We call it a soul fragmentation. So the soul in its whole self gets so much broken into pieces, because the soul in its in its purest form is very powerful. It's very very it's so powerful that when you attain, that's what you see now when you see these enlightened masters or these masters who have realized their self, their soul in its true version. They are very powerful, they are very confident, they know what they're doing. But but as a normal mortal human being who is living in this ignorance, we go through different stages in our life. There are so many fears, there are guilts, there are anger issues, so many emotions, and so many traumatic events for that person might happen in his life, where they felt a lot of trauma, a lot of suffering. So at that point of time, if we don't accept or if we don't endure that process properly, your soul gets fragmented from yourself, and it's as if a part of your soul is staying there and suffering it.
Yeah. Yes.
It's crying or it's going through that suffering there. You have moved on. You have not 40 years now, but that 20 years of yours is suffering. That's why inner child healing, everything is very important, because in that process, you are accepting your situation that you went through and you are reintegrating yourself. You are bringing that part of your soul and you're accepting your true self. So here also with Urmi's intense desire because of attachment, where she wanted her son to be alive no matter for what, Hanumanji had to intervene, because otherwise she's gonna be stuck there and the repercussions of it. Now for a soul with such a kind of experience, which is a matured soul, they couldn't see the soul to go through, so the gods do their own way, or the higher self or your ascended masters will help you. But we have to go through the suffering in the next lifetime. So we are carrying it. It's not an end there. You're carrying it into the other lifetime of yours. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. No question. When you were talking about that space where in the fifth dimension, past, present, future, everything goes at the same time. So yeah, of course, we know in the third dimension, the physical body, the soul, and everything. But when you go to the fifth dimension, there, when past, present, future, everything, there the time does not exist, and everything is going simultaneously. But the soul is just the one, right? Here we talk about the physical body, and there the soul is just the one. So how can you see all the three state at one time when there's the soul is the only one?
So here he's explaining with respect to the timeline, not the soul. It's as if you are seeing a movie from starting to the end. Now the soul is gonna live that particular timeline, or it's gonna live another timeline. That depends on the choices or the karma the soul does. So that's what they're seeing from the fifth dimension. That's what I'm telling you. Everything is like a movie running there, like the play that is running there. So from the beginning to the end, if the soul is gonna decide in this way, its timeline is gonna be like this. If the soul is gonna make this choice, the timeline is gonna be like that. So all these timelines are spread there. Now, what the soul is going to take, even the ascendant masters don't know, because it depends on the soul's choice that it's taking. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am.
No one knows for sure that this is the timeline there, because that's what Hanuman says. There are thousands of such timelines. So even for Hanuman or even for Kala also, they were waiting like what is going to happen. They're not sure. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Lakshmi Priya ma'am, this is Immortal Talks by Shunya. The book we are talking is Immortal Talks by Shunya. Yeah, master. So if there is no sharing, we'll just do 10 minutes of meditation.